sure we're taking good care of them.
Okay, so Kelsey, it is 9:02 again, so we might as well stay consistent. And that gave Steve his opportunity. So we will officially call the meeting to order. And our first item, as usual, is approval of the minutes from the Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 meeting. Any comments or changes? Okay, Les has moved that we approved. Do we have a second? Seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the second item, or actually the next item, is public comment. Did we receive any public comment, Kelsey?
We did not receive any public comments.
Okay. Now we're on to the action items, which is the utility relief request / disputed utility billing fees. I believe we have two. Give me just a second to turn to what I believe is the first one.
A quick clarification from staff on the first one. You can go either way, approve or deny that one. They still don't end up getting any money because of the seasonal usage. The prior year was more than it was this year during their leak period. So I kind of looked back at past, and it looks like in the past, the committee actually voted to approve and then just said in the letter, you know, you don't get anything for it, basically. So I wanted to clarify that before you guys.
That's an interesting distinction. It's within the rules, but I thank you for sending the ordinances. If you look at it carefully, this is within the rules for approval. But then in the separate section, it says how the adjustment will be calculated. So basically you could approve it and say, that's great, this is within the rules, but if we go through the adjustment calculation, we come out with zero, right?
Correct.
So I can see the logic behind approving it, but then letting them know
Yeah,
that
exactly,
the calculation results in zeros. Or
right.
It was interesting that they really didn't approve it or didn't fix it for a month. I don't know if they got it stopped with the temporary one or whether they just let it run. It may be different, but it didn't stop.
it's a fairly slow leak if it didn't bump up their seasonal average. So do we have a motion on this? And I would suggest that if we're going towards approval, that the motion include some specification that we realize that there will be no credit. So I realize I can't make the motion, but
Just like same as last year. That's, you know, just approve it and then send a note, so they don't get any.
That's staff recommendation.
the staff recommendation is to deny. So that's why we have to carefully read them.
Exactly. So what they did last year is they said we approved it, but we did send a letter saying that they don't get any money or anything because of that. I'll make that motion. I mean, just,
I'll second that.
Right. Sinead, can you clarify that motion, please?
yes, so we approved the, we were ready to approve with that, and we'll send a letter saying that, due to the ordinance, they do not get any money.
That is Janae's motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, Les has seconded it. So I think we're good to go. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, so I think we move on to the second and last one. And this was the leak in the crawl space broken T, correct? And staff recommendation is to approve that. Any discussion? Okay, and do we have a motion?
Second.
So Janae has moved to approve in accordance with the staff recommendation. Les is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I believe that's all of them, correct, Kelsey? Okay. So we're down to agenda item number 3, which is Public Works status.
Last month, you guys gave me an action item to come back and let you know how many leak requests we have approved over, I think you said the last 10 years, but we haven't been tracking them that long. So we've been tracking them since 2017. And year to date, which would be 4 years and 4 months from when they first started tracking it, we had $24,414 in leak requests that the city has given credit for. I will note that just the 4 months of this year alone in 2021, we're already higher than any of the prior years. And that's associated with the leak requests that we did so much discussion about last month for Ecola Creek Lodge. They have actually submitted a total of 5 requests, 2 of them in 2018, 1 of them in 2019, and 2 of them in 2021, which in 21, we know that those 2 leaks were on the same line. We don't know if the prior leaks they submitted were also on that same line. You could probably question that based on all of our discussion that we had over knowing what's going on there. But I think this kind of lends itself to our discussion about a lot of municipalities put some limits around how many of these that you can submit for, especially in one given year or as a total. Some of them put dollar amount caps on them as well. So I thought, and I'll give you guys this data. I thought this would be helpful as you guys work through how we would modify the ordinance in light of the Ion Water tool. This might be helpful to see how much the city actually gives them credits every year.
And how the statistics can be, will be the word, skewed by one entity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a good example, in 2017, we paid out just over $4,200 in credits to people. In 2018, we did 3,600, just over 3,600. In 2019, we had 6,300. And in 2020, had $5,700. And I'm rounding up, by the way. And then again, just year to date in 2021, we had over $8,700 in credits. And again, 2 of those were our largest leak, which was at the hotel. So it kind of gives you some perspective there. We do give a lot of credits every year for this. But it might behoove us to put something in the ordinance around some limits around that, like a lot of cities do. As we talk about, the questions that's come up about exactly what Steve put in his email about the portion of the water that doesn't go through the wastewater plant that we're actually collecting for. So I think this ordinance could use a lot of tweaking. So that was an action item. Again, I'll send this out to all of you guys. I wanted to kind of discuss it before I just send it out because it's just raw data. The other update until the budget is actually formally adopted, we did very well presenting the budget to the council and the budget committee. We were given the dollars that we had asked for everything, plus another project that I had spoken to them about that they decided to go ahead and fund. So I'll give you guys a total list of those. You've already seen them based on what I was going to take forward, but I'm going to give you that list again with the other project that they gave me funding for once it's adopted. And then we'll have an official list to actually track off of as the year goes along. But it was a really good session. So
Good.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
and that's all I had this morning.
All right, thank you, Karen.
And I'm going to just excuse myself for a minute. I need to make a call back to our city attorney's office. So I'm going to step out and Trevor can answer any questions that might come up.
All right, thank you.
I'll be right back.
Oh, thank you, Janine.
Yeah. We've got Fairhaven Street marked for construction, is it? Or
Yeah,
is that line gonna be replaced or just fixed in the area?
which line?
Harrison Street,
Yeah, what line are you speaking of?
the one going east?
The sewer line?
Yeah.
The force main will not be replaced, no. Gravity, we're looking at certain spots in the gravity line to be
That was my question.
section, but the force main itself, no, the force main's in good condition still.
I'm talking about the gravity.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing the guys are investigating it as we speak. That's why you see markings all over the ground there. We'll determine which repairs we're gonna go after before we pave. Yeah, there's some spots where we can get some 2-for-1s, one dig, 2 spot repairs. We're just trying to figure out the best plan of attack for that.
Also, I've noticed in walking our trails right now, we haven't done any surface replacement or maintenance on the walking trails. Is it scheduled? Usually we do chips down every couple of years.
Yeah, we do every couple of years. Is there some areas of concern? I went around it about 2 months ago and I didn't see anything too major.
The one behind the school is really.
Oh, the trail on the Nakus Park,
The Gower Street one,
Gower Street, which one?
the one from Spruce back into the woods there.
Yeah, the one that goes to the highway there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have the guys look at that. We were over there. We did some tree removals a while ago back there, so.
And look at the one on Ecola Creek along the school. It's the same way. They
Yeah,
just need a new coating of material.
You're talking about the one that's adjacent to the creek there by the school? Okay.
But the reason for that is when the material gets trapped down, then you get all the roots up. It's really dangerous to walk if the light's not good, or for old people like me.
Jeanette, did you have something? Okay.
Okay.
All right, then, so we have a added agenda item here, kind of late breaking, and so we will move on to that now, which is entitled Food and Beverage Tax. We've had some information from Les, or a perspective from Les, a perspective from Steve. And so Steve is not here, so Les, you kind of kicked this off, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, the reason I kicked it off was because I'm reading so much in the paper right now, the fire district, wanting to have this. And I think there is some justification for them to have some of the food tax levy if we go on with it. But we've got so many things that are affected by day trippers, and that's what the food tax levy was aimed at. Today I drove through downtown as usual to get my papers at 8 o'clock in the morning, no cars. Go down and get the mail and it's packed all the way through. And it's the day trippers that are adding to the cost of our wastewater, all of our systems, and also on the rescue thing. I do think we need to support the district on going to the state for compensation for the park, just like we charge the park, for the state parks for treatment. And I just thought this committee or the council should really go on record that if there's a food and beverage tax, that's going to be decided by the city. I think Steve's got some comments on that as far as the collection and such. But I still think it's a good revenue source. We do have big things coming up in water, wastewater rate increases. I've always thought that the food and beverage tax was one that could help us defray some of those costs. So it's really, I don't want the fire district to get a vote out, and they've got some big items coming up besides what they say in their annual report. The fire station is in tsunami zone. It's under 10 feet of water at the fire station, and that's because it was moved at a time when we had different information from Trevami. And they went by the recommendations then, the updated maps that corrected that. And we've also got Public Works that is in the tsunami zone even with their facilities and is better relocated. We haven't recommended it before because there's no people at it at the time, but it's Public Works building is top of it, the roof, you're safe. If you're on the ground, you're not. So with all these things, I think having the fire district right now look to having food and beverage tax as one of their financial plans is something that we should tell them to wait until the city decides what they're gonna do. Share, but not give them all that.
I probably a dumb question, but went out to dinner here on Sunday. It was $50 bill and there was 28 cents in tax. What was that?
That's tax that was put in, I think, about a year ago. It's like a 1% or something. That's called, I think it's called a cap tax. But anyway, but it was a new tax. And part of that law precludes cities or anybody else that has the ability to charge a food and beverage tax on the total bill. And so if anybody is going to move forward with food and beverage tax, it would have to be something less than the total bill. So, and Leslie, if I can just comment on a couple of your comments. Okay,
I'm sorry, Bruce, I didn't follow that. What was,
there was a tax put in by the state, and it's a tax on total sales. I
okay,
don't know what percent it is. If it's 1%, if it's 1/10 of 1%.
state imposed.
Yeah, that was relatively new. And in that, they put a caveat that said that communities could not impose a tax on a total bill. It didn't say you couldn't tax just food but not beverages. That's not a complete tax, or a tax on the total bill. So the discussion has been that it would be like a 50-50. But out of the 50, the city would take 5%, similar to, because we're going to have all of the expenses for management and all those things. And that's what we allow the hotels to keep. It's what we're going to allow restaurants to keep, for their expenses associated with it. So, and then to share the proceeds, tonight, there'll be a discussion that'll include Bob, and I forgot his last name, from a company called Eco Northwest. And they're the ones that did the study and came up with the numbers for how much it's going to potentially going to generate. And so there'll be that discussion tonight. But one of the concerns, honestly, is this is something that we feel that Orla, which is the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, will oppose. And so we think, when you're paranoid, everything makes sense. We think that they may be doing something in the legislature right now, which would come out, which could potentially preclude anything that we're looking at. And so that's why there may be consideration tonight for the county to impose before we, to try to beat that particular deadline. If we wait for a vote of everybody, it would happen on November 2nd. And if they took action that was effective June 28th, it would preclude the ability for the city to have that vote, and we would have lost that opportunity. So right now, the city is looking at the opportunity to provide an ongoing funding source for the fire district, and which would benefit everybody. And also The one that I'm advocating is the city hall pay the note, or essentially the bond service for city hall and police station. And that means that those two things could happen without any cost to taxpayers. And on top of that, the way that the debt service would work, it's kind of like your mortgage. It really hurts when you first start, but it stays the same for, for 30, 15 years, whatever your mortgage is. And so eventually there would be additional funds available, and they're unrestricted funds. So they could be used to pay off debt service on anything to do with the public works projects, anything like that. And right now, we're going forward with our first rate increase. It'll be voted on at the June meeting, and it's 3%, I think, for wastewater and 4% for water, in order to pay the initial debt service that we're starting on the first projects. So, but those are funds that could come forward. The food and beverage tax could be used to offset those costs. It could be used to pay for a restroom over here in Midtown. There's a lot of opportunities. But the issue is that it's an amazing, I call it momentous opportunity for the city to move forward without cost to the taxpayers. But there are those that don't think we should have that ability. And they have the ability and a strong presence in the legislature. And so there's consideration for the council to put that tax in place rather than wait for the vote. Everybody thinks the vote would pass if we're allowed to have the vote.
The came up.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So I have a question about this food and beverage tax, only because it seems like there's more dimension to it than meets the eye at the beginning, which is like, we're splitting it obviously with the fire department, which I think everybody agrees that the fire department needs more funding. I don't think that that's contested at all. I think that the issue that I am concerned about, just as a resident thinking about our community, is while it's not going to affect per se the taxpayers, how does it affect our local workers? In the sense that our workers that are working at our small businesses that are relying on tips because their wages are so low. And so how does this affect, because it's not hitting, as far as I understand, it's not hitting alcohol. It's, purchases of alcoholic drinks. And so that means it's hitting soft drinks, what other kinds of drinks is it hitting? And how does that affect people that are working in coffee shops or working in restaurants and taking away, because if you're getting a tax on your, you're getting this increased tax on your purchase or on your meal, and people are like, okay, well, that's the tax, I'm already paying the tax. How does that affect people's tipping? And how does that reduce people's tipping for people that can barely afford to live here or don't live in the area because it's not affordable?
Right. Let me see, unless the people are coming here from Montana, they're coming from a state that already has a tax. So if they were having the same meal in Pennsylvania, they would be paying a tax on it. So they're already used.
I understand that. Right.
Well, if I could please, well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of our day trippers, at least, are from Portland,
Okay.
especially during the week.
Okay. Yes, it is possible, and I've heard that it's possible that some people that could be impacted. There are offsets, for example, any place I go right now to do takeout food, I'm charged a tip or a fee of 18%. A restaurant can set a particular rate if they wanted to protect and attract workers. But this is one of the hardest parts of the question that's going to be facing the council. The difference is, and this is just one consideration, there are other considerations, is do you not improve the fire department? Do you charge the residents or the taxpayers for a city hall to, and the offset is it may or may not impact the workers' tips. But again, I mean, there are considerations that every place else, people that are coming here unless they're from Montana. And I paid 8% when I was in Florida, and I still go ahead and I tip, highly, and I tip on top of that 18%.
Mhm.
So, but that's part of the difficult decision that council has to face. Does that trump the ability to, improve the fire department and, get the city hall out of the tsunami zone or not?
Or, I mean, this isn't the only, I guess my point also being that it's not the only way to achieve these things, right? Like, I mean, I think that we've talked about in previous meetings, and certainly there's been a lot of talk in Cannon Beach about the different mechanisms that are available to us in order to achieve these things. A food and beverage tax is an option for sure. I just think that it's important to consider the weight and the gravity and not just consider it in terms of a casual conversation, but actually look at the economics of it through studies before making these decisions.
And I don't know where the studies would come from again, because everybody else already has these taxes. But I can address the other possibilities that
Well, I
we
mean,
have.
like Ashland, Ashland is a great example, right? Ashland is a community that they imposed a temporary tax and then it went away and it came back, didn't have a tax, and it greatly affected the workers there.
But I don't know if they did a study how that impacted the tips before and after. So what we have is anecdotal information from Ashland that it doesn't impact them. But again, I bet you that would be who it is that you ask. So I don't know if there are actual studies on how that happened. But as far as the other taxes,
Bruce, this came up before you were hired.
can I finish, Les? Because we're talking about,
Okay.
I'll get back. But no, another opportunity, for example, if we wanted to do the city hall, we could go to the voters and we could have a referral, and then there would be a charge on their property for the debt service. So that's one. There is a roundabout way, but that doesn't necessarily say that we can do the same thing for the fire department that we can do with the food and beverage. But at the same time, the fire department, or the fire district, could go forward and have what they call a levy, and they've already got one levy out there at 5%. I forgot what the percent was, but it's only for 5 years. And they can do one for 5 years for normal operations, and they can do one for 10 years for capital. But if you're going to, I don't know, it gets into the whole financing thing. But in terms of the opportunity for the city and the fire district to work together, it doesn't work very well on trying to go ahead and do it through property taxes. Plus, the residents will pay that property tax.
Right. I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying to do it through property tax. I want to be very clear that I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that there are other options to affect the tourism base that we could employ instead of just a food and beverage tax. It's one option. Food and beverage is one option, but there are other options that could be employed that wouldn't hit the taxpayer base of property owners here.
I'm trying to get to that one. There's one more, and that is the tourism lodging tax.
Mhm.
The tourism and lodging tax to generate the same amount as we would be able to collect with a food and beverage tax would have to be raised 8% to give the same amount of money to both the city and the fire district. 8% is what we currently charge totally for all of our budget. So we would double TLT. That would have no impact whatsoever on day trippers. That would only charge a higher tax for people that are staying in lodging facilities. So the day trippers would not not increase their costs to, I'm sorry, what they have to pay to offset the costs that they're currently borne by the taxpayers. So I'm sorry, Les, I just want to get that out.
Thanks, Bruce.
Where this food and beverage tax came up was because of our experience in visiting Bend and Ashland, where I think it's been over 5 years ago that they installed that, and committee asked me to pick up their ordinances and such, which I did. And they imposed that themselves. And we never had any problem with paying extra tax on that and including tip.
Right.
It made sense, but it's something that Ashland and Ben have done for quite a few years.
I think it's Ashland.
Into, at least 5 years ago.
That may be, the two that I'm aware of now are Ashland and Yahats. They currently have it. I don't know, Bend may have it. I wasn't aware that.
And had it at least 5 years ago, when I picked up the information. And the thing you say that there's only Montana out there, I drive down there, pick up the mail, and I'll probably see 10, 15 out of state, different states, license plates on the day trippers coming down to visit us.
Right.
Now, if you say it's not fair, is it fair to the residents here? We're paying for all the parking lots and everything we've done to bring in tourists. And then we've got to pay extra money for new water and all of that.
Because I totally get, I'm in total agreement. I'm not saying that's not
I'm
fair.
not saying, I think if the fire district wants to have a food and beverage tax,
They can't.
they shouldn't.
They can't.
Yeah.
They can, the districts cannot impose a food and beverage tax.
And I think the city should.
And that's what's, they've asked the city to do it and to share those funds. And that's the concept that we're working with.
Yeah. And
But Bruce, you're saying that it's not going to go to a vote because we're trying to rush it before it could go to a vote. So we're trying to make it so that it's not a vote for the community to vote on.
The concern is that there are those that totally oppose food and beverage taxes in the state. And we are in a legislative session right now. And if they change the rules, we are looking to work under by, as of January 28th, we might be precluded from having an election on November 2nd.
Mhm. But I mean, what gives us concern that that's gonna, like, that's so speculative. And so I would just wonder, like, on what basis are we making that assumption? Like, what sort of evidential information do we have that it could be shut down? I mean, otherwise it just seems like we're rushing to pass this without a vote. I'm just being a devil's advocate here in terms of just thinking about the process and, you know.
I understand, but these folks, let me see, when we started talking about the Cannon Beach Elementary, we heard from Orla. I forgot what the last time was, but they are very protective and they will let you know as soon as they think that you're doing something that's out of bounds. And they have been against food and beverage taxes. You know, it's my understanding, I've only been here for 3 years. But the idea is that we can, you know, and again, it's a risk. They may not. Those of us that are dealing with them, they probably will try to take some action. And if they do, and they're successful, then we would not be able to have the referral and we would not have all of these benefits. Now, we could still have those benefits, but they would be paid for by the property owners.
Well, I'm sorry to adamantly like disagree. I think that there are other mechanisms, like I said previously, that don't affect property owners or residents. I mean, obviously I live here and I don't want to be affected as much as possible by tourism that's being, you know, prompted up and marketed to when I live here, when I feel like they're paying the tourists are paying a disproportionate share of their wear and tear on our community. So do not get me wrong. I'm not advocating for residents paying for the wear and tear of tourists. What I am saying is that I think that there are a lot of other mechanisms that we could deploy or we could investigate that are affecting tourists that tourists would pay for.
There's one. There is one.
I mean, I don't think we have time in this meeting to go into that. I'd be happy to talk offline about what I'm talking like more specifically, but I do think that there are other options. Yes.
Okay, there's one.
Well, I think there's more than one. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So,
but not that would generate the kind of funds that we're talking about. I mean, we could try.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to have that conversation. I mean, we don't have to do it here. I'm just saying for like as a
Okay,
resident.
Let's talk after the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Along that line, this was added as a line item to the Public Works Committee agenda for 5 minutes. And it's obviously extremely important and very impactful to the community here. But it seems like it has some only limited jurisdictional
Right.
purview within the Public Works Committee. So I agree, we need to have some broader discussions through council and public hearings, but I don't want to personally, I don't want to burn up a lot of time with this in this meeting.
I agree.
I know, Les, your point was if such a tax was passed, it should be used broadly for some public works.
My only reason for bringing it up is I read in the paper all the time, fire district is saying, we're gonna have that part of our revenue for our budget. And it's been in the Astorian and in the Gazette. And my reason for bringing it up was that I don't think the fire district should determine that they're gonna use this as part of their financial plan without us having some voice in it. And I think the city and Public Works has a great interest in not only a food and beverage tax, but anything that can lower the cost to the resident here and spread some of the costs to all the visitors that show up every day. And it's not just on 4th of July anymore. It's every day of the week. We go down there and I've got to fight my way to get into the post office because of all the tourists that are there. And I'm only bringing it up because the fire district has been promoting it.
Well, the fire district made the request of the city to impose a food and beverage tax, and then for them to get the funding. And then the city said, well, if we're going to do this, we have needs also. And so there's been no decision on how the funds would be spent. Tonight, you're going to hear from the people that put together the study. We think their number is high, but we have nothing else to compare it to. And so it's just a conversation. And there seems, let me see, to address your point, we think that it's quite logical that Orla would try to preclude us from doing this. Because if we did it, it would be happening all over the state. And so what is being weighed probably tonight is which way should we go? Should we wait and possibly have it precluded or do it? And then again, I don't even know for sure if council is going to go for the food and beverage tax.
I don't think it's time to do it right now.
But
I
again,
don't think it's time for the fire district to do it.
well, they can't.
Right.
All they can do is ask us.
It has to be a partnership. Yeah.
Is everybody okay with moving on? Sounds like tonight's an important event if people have
Yes.
further put on this. Okay. That way we can maybe get out here reasonably on time. I don't know what Trevor and Karen's schedule is. I had Kelsey be agenda item number 4, more discussion on our process and procedures for relief, utility relief. And in my mind, subject to what the committee's thinking, Karen, am I correct that the Ion Water project's going to be finished in about October? Right? No,
Second week.
the Ion Water project will be complete in about October.
October.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I don't feel a tremendous time pressure here to make a hasty decision. I just want to kind of go back to some of the source documents that guide us, kind of revisit those, because I don't know how often you folks have done it, and I think it's important. When I was in law school, they'd always say, when in doubt, read the contract. So I just wanted to do that today. And if and when we make any changes to the ordinance, I think we should make it as a agenda item so the public's aware that that's going to be the meeting that we make a decision. So this is just part of some background discussion. And Kelsey, thank you. You sent out 3 ordinances that impact this committee and our duties under that, under utility relief. The first one that I want to look at here and just have a brief discussion on is the 13.18.080 leakage. To me, this is kind of the sort of the holy grail that puts Cannon Beach where it is. And if you look at A there, it says customers will keep all pipes and fixtures. So that would be just about everything, right? So the customer's line in repair at their own expense and will be held liable for any leakages and all damages which may result from their failure to do so. So what I assume that is the source ordinance that, as it exists now, that gives us the lack of discretion, if you want to say that, as to the 100% liability for water leakage. That's what that ordinance says to me. Does anybody have a different interpretation that says will be held liable for any leakage? So I think that
Pretty
is
clear.
pretty, yeah, okay. So I'll make sure, so that's where we start from. And then you go over to, now I'm going to move over to 2.34.020, powers and duties of the Public Works Committee. And this is something that I think some or all of us get a little confused about. It says the committee, which would be us, I'm on G there. The committee shall evaluate claims for excess sewer charges. So that's really what we're looking at. We're not looking at the water portion really at all. We're looking at this cause of the leak. We're looking at the source of the leak, but really all we're evaluating is the claim and request for excess sewer charges. Related to water leakage, not flowing into the waste treatment system, and refund or deny charges in excess of normal usage. We looked at one of those today, right? Based on the Public Works staff recommendation. So there's kind of a lot there. So we're only looking at sewer charges, and we're only looking at those excess sewer charges for leakage not flowing into the waste treatment system. And we're going to refund any excess or deny any charges, they mean sewer there, in excess of normal usage based on the public staff recommendation. So that's really pretty narrow. I'm not saying we're going outside of that. If anything, I mean, I'm just looking down range here. We have very little discretion. All we're really doing when these come in, and I've looked at these for 4 years now, is it's pretty routine. I mean, based on the on the current ordinance, if it did not go into the sewer system, we will refund or deny any charges in excess of normal uses based on the Public Works staff recommendation.
Yep.
So I don't know if anybody has any comments, but really what we're doing here is really very clerical in my mind.
Limited.
Limited, yeah.
Well, historically, I can tell you the Public Works Committee was formed only because the council didn't want to fight on sewer and water rates as far as deciding whether they were correct or not. And that's why they formed the Public Works Committee. And that was done after the comprehensive planning committee, but it was primarily so the council didn't have to listen to somebody complain about what their rate is. And I agree with what you're saying, but that's why we were put together. And I do think that having a limit on how many times you fix the line is due. The main thing over the years has been the irrigation systems that people have that leak. And that's the ones that started it out. But the ones that get hit so hard are the ones that have multiple buildings that go through. I think your idea to discuss later on, putting some limit on how many times you get to fix a line is right to do. But I do think that we can do it within our existing ordinances.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Amber.
So it seems like there are two kind of points that you raise with reading just like these reviewing of the ordinances together and understanding that the scope is quite limited in terms of the committee's duty, right? So it seems like there's two issues. One is there a question on the table about increasing the scope or adding to the scope? And then the second question is, do we want to add a cap or do we want to add a number, like a dollar amount, like Karen said, a dollar amount cap or a number request cap? And those seem to be distinctly different in terms of like, does the purview of the committee need to expand? Is it too limited to be able to, or I mean, I'm not saying either way. I'm just saying it sounds to me like those are the two things that are kind of on the table right now. And it's just important to delineate them.
Right, that's what I wanted, is just kind of a freewheeling discussion today, so I appreciate that. And Les, this is where, looking downrange, and again, I don't get too premature. If we go down the road, for example, like, you can't continue to have a leaking line, there's going to be a limitation on relief. Well, right now, the only latitude we have is you're not, in that situation, so you're not going to get any sewer relief anymore because we don't have any jurisdiction over water.
Right.
So it's a little illogical saying you need to fix your line or we're not going to give you sewer relief anymore. Well, I was,
Right.
I say, I'm still not putting it in the sewer. So that's where
That's my point.
right. And my point also, yes, Les.
There is the other thing that's come up, that Jan brings up and others, is conservation of water. Right now, we've got good source and we're not exceeding that source. But if we get into critical areas where we don't have the water supply, then it's a lot more important. So you got conservation that's brought into this that's now affecting a lot of the discussion.
The city made a sizable capital investment to replace these meter modules
Mhm.
and provide a tool to the residents that allows them to monitor this more closely, not only their leak, but their overall usage. And so that speaks to itself for us to be able to utilize that and set some parameters for the residents when it comes to requesting leak relief, sewer or otherwise.
Right. But right now we can't do otherwise
That's
based on the existing.
And that's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah, right.
And you're right. Right now, your purview is specifically sewer, but it doesn't mean that the city doesn't modify the ordinance that says we're going to look at everything because now we have this tool that we didn't have before that puts the power in your hands to be able to address these things much faster than you ever could before,
I
as
think,
well as us.
Karen, I think you gave the sort of the corollary example last month. Is it right now we have discretion on, is it late fees or so forth? If you sign up for automatic payment, can you remind me what that is? There's something that the city does relating to utility bills if you sign up for automatic payment, which is kind of a similar.
Our finance director has encouraged people to get on automatic bill pay. So when anybody is late paying their bill and they get a late fee, when they call in to pay their bill or complain about the late fee, she offers them the option that if they get signed up for auto pay, and hopefully that it prevents a late fee in the future, that she will waive the late fee that they have on their bill. And so that's a trade-off to incent the customer to get on auto pay and not find themselves in a late fee situation. And so it's a perk. It's a win-win. The city gets somebody on auto pay and the customer gets that late fee waived. So that's something that she has the discretion to offer to the customers.
So conceivably, just thinking, it's brainstorming, that would be something where we could possibly use Ion Water as the same type of vehicle saying,
Absolutely.
we could give you X relief this time, provided you get signed up for Ion Water.
But there's a lot of residents in town that don't have the capability to be on Ion Water. I've had several residents call me and kind of give me the what for. I don't have a computer and I don't have a smartphone and I'm not getting either or. So there are customers out there that aren't going to sign up for Ion Water because they don't have the option to.
Good point.
So just be careful tying anything to Ion Water when it comes to relief because you can't exclude those people.
Well, it's the same with auto pay. I mean, some people don't have their
Right.
account set up where they could have auto pay, but it's something that's available for the people that want to take advantage of that. So it's not an either or, it is an option. And
Yeah.
so I definitely think it's something you guys should consider. Again, I look at that as a return on the city's investment that they paid to put this out there. And the idea is to get as many people on Ion Water and using it as possible. Trevor's right. There's going to be some folks that don't have the ability and they don't have someone to help them do that, but it is available for the ones that do. And In the meantime, Daryl continues to make those phone calls to our customers that he does today to assist them knowing they have a leak. So no one's really excluded. It's just an added tool that's offered to folks.
And irrigation lines, you spoke of irrigation lines, those don't even come before you. It's not even given an option for them to get relief from an irrigation line.
Mhm.
So that should be fine, right?
Well, it should be fine, but I don't see that in the ordinance. It's on our form.
Mhm.
But I don't see that, somehow that exception morphed over time. I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't see it in the ordinance. It's only, that exception is only in our form. So
But that is something you might want to look at adding to the ordinance as you guys look at this as a global. There's people that have their irrigation systems metered. And so they would be able to monitor. There's other people that don't. So again, it's an option that we're offering them, and it's incentive saying that if they experience this, an option will be that they get their Ion Water account active, signed up and active, that we can work some other kind of compensation for them, however you guys want to do it.
So, thank you, Karen. Thank you. Just want to follow quickly on Trevor's point, because I did want to look at the form real quick. And now that we looked at the two basic ordinances as to our jurisdiction, our form, which actually I felt better about after I carefully read it, the heading doesn't say leak relief request. It says utility relief request. I like that. That's, City of Cannon Beach has a policy of issuing partial credits for leaks that are repaired in a timely manner. So if I was a citizen, I read that, I think, well, I'm going to get credit for my water part. But then it goes on to say, the city expects leaks to be repaired within 10 days of discovery, which is interesting. Again, that's not in the ordinance, I don't think, but it's still important. I think we can set independent policy, depending on what you guys think. The relief request must be filed within 60 days of repair, and the relief request shall not exceed 90 days of usage. So we already have some limitations, at least on our form. So I don't see it in
Right.
ordinance. Credits granted are only for the sewer portion of the utility bill. So there's the critical one. Only for mechanical failures of the living space plumbing system, including the main line from the meter to the house, such as broken water line, frozen pipes, interior fixture failures, etc. And this is Trevor's point, and excludes any exterior plumbing system component failure, which I guess that would be things outside the house. No relief will be granted for exterior faucets left on or irrigation system failures. Exterior hose bibs that have a removable key operation handle will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Credits are based on your average sewer usage for the same period for the previous year. This average is deducted from the total consumption used during the time of the leak, provided the leak did not impact the wastewater treatment facility. The Public Works Committee will review the adjustment request at their next meeting. So to me, the form goes a little beyond the strict black letter of the ordinance. So that might be something else we want to look at if we want to incorporate some of these or meld these documents together a little better, not necessarily change the policy. Just something that I wanted to throw out today. And is there any discussion on that? I only had one other ordinance I want to look at. Any other discussion?
The only comment I'd make is I think it's important that we do put in a water conservation aspect of our ordinance, not just the form, but our ordinance, now that we have this tool. And because these ordinances aren't changed often, this is our chance to kind of look at it globally.
Yeah.
Set some parameters around it globally. And I know that at this point, it's not within your purview. I've asked for your input on this. So I'd like you guys to look at it as a whole. Okay.
Exactly. That's why, in my mind, this may be an agenda item for the next 3 or 4 months. So that when we come down to a decision, we feel like we've looked at everything.
And just be aware, you mentioned the 10 days, you got to have the repair done in 10 days. Be aware that if it's a main line from the meter to the house, most folks don't have enough money to pay a plumber to come out there and dig up their front yard and try to find where the leak was. My neighbor, for instance, he had a leak in his main line that went to his house, and he couldn't afford a plumber to come out and dig up his line. So he had to manually dig it up himself, and I helped him. Took him 2.5 weeks to get it dug up and then to get a plumber out there. So just be aware that 10 days is kind of a tight frame. Unless you've mentioned it in the past about getting plumbers to call you back and get them out here. And then the financial impact that it takes on a customer if you're paying a plumber to dig up your front yard. It's expensive. So a lot of residents here, they have to do a lot of work themselves in order to get a plumber out there to do the necessary repairs. So just think about that. Because I deal with a lot of customers that, are financially, they can't afford to call in the McEwens, call in the Thorsons, come to their house to dig up their front yards. Fixtures are another point. That's simpler. You don't have to dig up your front yard. Toilets, sinks, that's different. So.
Your experience from the field, you and Daryl and crew are, I think, a very important component of this as to what's practical, what's working,
Right.
what's ironclad, what's not. So that input's important.
And I think the ones that you guys really want to focus on when we set the parameters are the repeat offenders, the people that remain on that leak list for an extended period of time, especially the businesses, because they're using far more water than your regular Joe Blow or Jane Doe resident. Not that some of a residential leak can't be, a lot of gallons per minute. But when you talk to Daryl, you see the tendency for, certain people to remain on the leak list on an ongoing basis.
I want to clarify, me helping my neighbor, I did that as a neighbor, not as a city employee. It was on the weekend. So.
Karen,
Didn't even enter my mind.
As a good Samaritan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Karen, can I ask you a question though, about something that you said earlier? When we were talking about the leak stuff, you mentioned that Ecola Creek Lodge had put in 5 requests, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And that, I'm just curious to know, just out of curiosity, based on what you're talking about with repeat offenders, do you have a total of the dollar amount? And also since we know that there were 5 requests since 2017, since they've been tracked, what the total was for those requests, just to put it in perspective, for example, because they are a business.
And I'll send you guys all those numbers so you have them after this meeting. But I think the real focus I was trying to put on the hotel was the fact that they had put in 5 requests. And we know that 2 of the 5 were on the same exact line. We don't know about the other 3. We can make some assumptions. But that's kind of what we were talking about last month, is when you have those situations where not only city staff who may have helped isolate the leak, but then your plumbing professional comes out and they tell the person, whether it's a residence or a business, that this line needs to be replaced. If they don't do that and they continue to send requests to the city for credits, that's where I think your parameters should be set such that we should not have to do that.
Agreed.
The amount of money that we paid out in that particular case could have replaced that line.
Right. That was what the reason why I was asking is,
So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about is, their monthly water, what they pay for water to the city is exorbitant, and they pay, they're a good customer. But when we come to conservation, that's where we say, that's why a lot of cities limit, you can only put in 1 request per year. Okay. And that kind of squelches a situation exactly like this, where you have a line that's problematic. It's been identified as problematic, but the customer's not taking action to replace it. And it may be because of what Trevor says as far as cost, but then the amount of money the city's paying them for that credit.
I want to clarify that.
Repair the line.
It keeps twisting my brain. The city's not really paying them. Because the water didn't enter the sewer system. We are waiving collection of a sewer fee because it's been determined it didn't go into the sewer system. So that the
Doug,
city,
whatever you want to call it, a credit, waiving a fee, whatever.
Right.
It is money that is going out from the city's pocket that is not coming in as revenue.
right.
So however you want
Okay,
to call it.
all right. We're not issuing them a check. We're not paying them. But your point is, I think, the same regardless, like you say, of the terminology. The amount, for example, of the instance we're talking about, the amount that they were credited for their, for their sewer,
Mhm.
which they normally would pay, would probably have been enough to fix the line. You end up with the same conclusion.
Yep.
Speaking of hold on one second. I want to speak to your conservation aspect of it. We also have residents out there on the other end of the spectrum, not the financially poorer people in the community, but we have rich people in this community that instead of fixing their leak, they'll just keep paying their water bill. And that goes back to what Les is saying, the conservation thing. They don't give two cares about the water that's going in the ground. They're willing to just write a check for it and continue on with it. We have those customers too. So somehow you gotta treat them, put them in a different bracket. The last thing I'm gonna say, and I'll stop talking about this issue, is in my experience here with the city, the simpler, the better. If it's straightforward and simple.
Yeah.
If you start making this thing so big and confusing, it's hard for me or any of us to follow these. So that's all I'm gonna
No,
say.
that's a great point, Trevor. Simple is always good.
Mhm.
And
Agreed.
I have to excuse myself for another commitment, so Trevor's gonna.
Okay, and we're almost done. Thank you very much, Karen.
Yeah,
Thanks, Karen.
thank you.
Welcome, you guys.
What we'll find, we got one elk lodge here, or whatever, Willow Creek Lodge. But there are 4 or 5, just a handful of motels and users that probably account for half of where we run into the problem. And it's not just this, the Swigert property and the conference grounds continually come back to ask for more money. And that's where some penalty for doing it would be imposed. And some of it is because they've got a number of buildings and they don't maintain the line in between them.
Yep. A lot of water lines on private residences are hard to access because they were put back in the good old days. That's what I call it. And they could be underground on top of boulders and everything else. So it's just, some water lines are difficult to replace at residence homes.
Well, mine goes into my driveway.
Exactly. And so those are all things you got to take into account, and if you don't have the money to dig up your whole front yard and replace the whole line, you got to pay a plumber to go out there with sound equipment and try to find out exactly where the leak is. So that all takes time.
Mhm.
Like I said, you do have the residents out there that don't care. They're just going to keep paying their leaky water bill and deal with it at another.
Well, that's a good point. And maybe downrange, we want to use a lot of carrots for what I call carrots for water conservation. And I don't think it would be, in my mind, outside the box to consider a stick. If you just you continually use a lot of water and you don't care, you pay the bill, well, maybe there's a way to make it more painful.
Right, exactly.
I have, and this is something silly, but I would have a request from Public Works, from the employees to maybe come up with something that they consider it would be a global thing that we should be looking at. Because they have the experience, and like Trevor said, we can add all this language and everything, but the interpretation that they have to do also is going to be difficult. So I would recommend, or I would ask that, the employees, Karen, Trevor, and everyone else comes up with something that they think that it should be a global thing that we should actually.
I wouldn't change any of the lingo that Doug just read. That makes sense. You guys want to add and tweak a little bit, but I wouldn't skew too far off that.
You're talking mainly on the form, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, so that's why I don't want us to be.
The customer's getting charged for their water usage. They're just getting a relief from their sewer. If it doesn't go in the toilet. That's it. So that's simple. If we
See,
start.
my thing is, I don't want to have a meeting after meeting and go back and forth and do those things, because we have done that before. To me, that's the same way. It's a simple thing. So that's why I want to make sure that we're not like going back and forth, tweaking here and there. So I agree with Trevor, what he's saying, and it shouldn't be that difficult to come up with a global thing.
Right. And I completely agree. And I think the experience from the field is equally as important as us sitting here in this room trying to figure out what's practical. So we want it all. And we appreciate that. So
Actually, what the staff did was they gave me the wrench to turn my water off and on so that I would till I found the leak. I would just turn it on enough to fill out what past that such that we needed and turn it off again.
And I'm getting a lot of requests for that. People want us to go out and shut their meters off because they're having an issue and they're having a plumber come over. I take that opportunity to talk to the customer at that point and say, yeah, I'll shut your meter off, but you're gonna put your own personal shut off since you got a plumber out there now. Because a lot of residents here don't have personal shut offs like it's dictated in our building codes that you gotta have a personal shut off 3 feet from the water meter. A lot of homes, the majority of the houses here don't have that. So I take that option when they do request to have their meter shut off because they're having a plumber come over for a water issue, to take that opportunity, dig down, tap into your line and put your personal shut off in. So,
Actually, that's covered in the ordinance. I was surprised. It says agents of the city are authorized to turn off water service and lock such service at the meter of unattended premises upon discovery of water leaks from broken or defective pipes or fixtures. Water service will not be turned back on until the property owner has installed a master water shut off valve as close to the meter as practical. So
and we don't shut, if there's a leak, when Daryl does his reads and he confronts a leak, if they can't get a hold of the residents, if they're not in town, we don't shut the water completely off. We just dumb it down quite a bit.
Mhm.
Because if you shut the water off completely, then you'll get sedimentation and everything else in the line. It's a bigger issue at that point. But we'll slow the water down significantly.
Okay, so my view is, again, I think even today, we got a lot of information. We got a lot of things to consider. We went back, looked at the source documents, so we just kind of keep hacking away at this for a while. Maybe we'll do not much of anything. Maybe we'll decide to make some changes, but I just want to make sure that we're operating from all the information we can gather, including the.
As it sits now, when I explain this to customers, when they call me about leaks, it makes sense in their heads.
Okay,
I'm just saying there's a discrepancy between the heavy hitters in this community and the normal residents in this community as far as reaction to water leaks. Most residents, they want to get it fixed as quickly as they can because they don't like paying extra money.
Mhm.
You do have the population here that they don't mind paying that extra bill.
And that's an interesting perspective that from you today that I think we need to add to our decision making. So, it's because if water conservation is one of the key elements.
It's one of the key points that we're looking at. So,
Yeah. So let's put that all in our collective minds here and we'll just keep working away at this. The last thing did somebody say something? Okay. The last thing that I wanted to review as far as the ordinances, and this is not real important, except my first reaction after being here for 4 years is that we don't do this. And I thought, yes, we do too. This is 13.18.070, the utility charge adjustments and payment agreements. And I'm looking at A there, errors in billings or collection shall be corrected in a timely manner by the city. Resulting credits or accounts, a refund shall be made as expeditiously as possible. Disputed billings or other collection transactions shall be heard by the Public Works Committee. Any appeals concerning utility rates or services or interpretation or enforcement of this chapter, and this chapter is important because this chapter would just be the billing and collection part of the ordinance, or interpretation or enforcement of this chapter are to be heard by the Public Works Committee. Any applicant aggrieved by the Public Works Committee's decision may appeal to the city council by filing the city with written request, yada, yada. And I thought, well, we don't do that. And I thought, yeah, we have. I got to thinking back when people object to like their door hangers and late fees, we have seen those, haven't we? Okay. It's like, so this seems to be working in my mind. I don't know if anything is, but since Kelsey sent it out, rightfully so, as to a duty of the Public Works Committee, I just want to remind us of that. So it's about 9 after. Anybody have anything else? I won't go the goody order yet. I will say anything else on this, at least for today. Okay, so now we can go to good of the order. And is there anything under that category?
I want to start walking the streets.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Stephen, please join me.
You're talking about the street condition.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, so I was hoping that we could, some of us or all of us can, take some streets and start doing that,
And that's kind of related to the one that when Carolyn was here, we had that chart and I said, who
Yeah.
did this?
Correct.
Mhm.
So Richard and I did that a few years ago, and then Caroline did that a few years ago, but I think it's about that time. It needs to be, we need to get started again. I mean, it's been what, 2 years? Yeah,
I think 2 or 3 years, yeah.
At least 3 years, yeah. So I think it's time to start, and then that way, when we're complaining about something or somebody's complaining about something, we can say, okay, we have done this. But I think it's a good chance.
What was the procedure on that? I mean, we're
We
kind of laymen. I mean, I can look at the street and say,
we have a form. It tells you what to look for. So-
oh, okay, it has criteria.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it's pretty simple. It's not something like when you make your own decision. That's the criteria we follow.
okay. And is that sent off to the, I will say, the more experts to see if they concur in our
No,
findings?
We just normally just return it back to Public Works and then they.
You call me an expert?
Well, I would assume you're a little more of an expert in street repair than,
That information that you guys have in that spreadsheet's valuable for me.
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to know.
And then they look at it.
I'm not gonna critique it and then question it, but it's just helpful for me to get my feet on the ground quicker and
Okay.
move quicker on
That's the
action
only
items.
reason to do this.
I would say if it's helpful to Trevor and crew, there'd be no.
It also
reason
helps
not to.
because I have to submit a study to or information to ODOT every year. And so that just kind of helps out with
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
speed up my process.
That's what I was,
Okay.
too.
Why not then?
Because we're supposed to be helping, so let's do something to help.
Agreed. So is there something specific that you're looking to in terms of schedule or people
Normally,
or?
there's 2 of us, we should have at least 2 of us to go and, assess that. I think it's just, one of those things. So we should set up some time to maybe, maybe once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks or something. We can have, teams or something like that. And
Yeah.
some of us can pick one area, some of us can pick another area. So
Mhm.
well, we can get the list from you guys from Public Works and then we'll split it up. How's that?
And that list, would that list be every street, just so we know where they are? And,
There's 6 of us, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
I
can-
think that'd be great. I'd be up for that.
Yeah,
My only thing is when you guys do this evaluation, make it simple.
yes.
Don't
exactly.
go overboard with the streets and, all this information, make it simple.
That's
When you make it confusing, it's just
Right.
harder for us to interpret
make
it.
sure, yeah,
Okay.
we don't want to like do pictures and details and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Just follow the form as it is.
Yep.
So,
Exactly. That sounds good.
okay, so maybe, do you want to make that an agenda item for next month to kind of get maybe down into the scheduling and planning for that?
Let's do it.
All right, Kelsey, that sounds like that was affirmative, so that'll be on next month's agenda. I don't have anything else. Is there any more good of the order?
May 24th, there's a group coming from Portland. I cannot remember the name of it now. But there's a group coming to clean the Tolovana area, so for a few hours.
Hold on 1 second. I got something, I think. Go ahead and keep talking.
Let me see if I can find the name of it. Anyway, so, we keep getting groups that come and help, so it's kind of a nice thing. So that's pretty much all I have.
Okay, well, it looks like Trevor had something that he wanted to bring back into the room, so we're gonna hold for him for a minute or two. A little bit of dead time. Those groups, those are typically what, church groups, community or?
No, there can be any kind of public works, we get Boy Scouts, Girl
Okay.
Scouts, college groups. So we have, different kinds of groups. They just call and they prefer to have somebody that, can, show them. And basically the reason why we do it is because we want to make sure that they understand the safety.
Right, so my question is, when you say, who do they request to? You're in a group or?
So normally they call Saul.
Okay,
And then Saul calls me and they ask me if I'm willing to work with these groups, and then I say, sure.
Okay. That's great.
It's a teen and outdoor programs from Lake Oswego Parks and Rec. That's who they are. And it's a good thing, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Teenagers coming to clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you made the, I think you made the point last month is don't clean too much before they get here.
Yeah, which I got in trouble, so.
I'm sorry.
Cut it out, please, wow, yeah.
I didn't know that was a sensitive item.
It's a very sensitive item, apparently.
Okay,
I was just joking.
okay, that's all off the record then to
Yes,
Jeff.
please.
I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're still in the good order. Last call. Amber?
I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, Janae, Les, me, Trevor. Okay, we are adjourned. Boom, boom.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.